When I picked up the phone to ask my son Marcus when he planned to visit for Thanksgiving, his voice came through flat and distant, like he was reading from a script someone else had written. "Actually, Mom, I'm spending it with Claire's family this year. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I had spent every Thanksgiving for the past 32 years preparing his favorite dishes, the cornbread stuffing with sage that he used to sneak bites of before dinner, the sweet potato casserole with the pecan topping he'd eat straight from the serving spoon when he thought I wasn't looking. But what pierced through my chest like a cold blade wasn't the canceled holiday. It was what I heard 3 days later, sitting in the waiting room of Dr. Chen's office for my annual checkup. 2 women were talking in the chairs beside me, their voices carrying that particular pitch of gossip that makes strangers lean in despite themselves. One of them mentioned a name I knew, Claire Donovan, Marcus's girlfriend of 2 years. The woman was her aunt. "Such a sweet girl," the aunt was saying, "and that boyfriend of hers, Marcus, he's had such a hard life. An orphan, you know, raised himself practically. Makes it even more impressive that he got into medical school." The magazine I'd been pretending to read slipped from my fingers and hit the linoleum floor with a slap that made both women look over. I bent to retrieve it, my hand shaking so badly I nearly couldn't grasp it. An orphan. My son, the boy I had carried for 9 months, nursed through colic and chickenpox and pneumonia, the teenager I had worked 3 jobs to support, had told people he was an orphan? I sat there in that waiting room, surrounded by the antiseptic smell and the low murmur of daytime television, and felt something crack open inside me. Not my heart. That would have been too simple, too clean. This was deeper, more fundamental. It was the foundation of my entire adult life, developing fissures, the weight of 32 years suddenly pressing down on fractures I hadn't known existed. That night, I couldn't eat the dinner I'd prepared. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Marcus had done his homework while I folded laundry between my evening and night shifts, the same table where I helped him fill out college applications until 2 in the morning. And I did something I hadn't done in decades. I calculated. I had never kept track before. It seemed too transactional, too cold to put numbers on motherhood. But now, with the word orphan echoing in my skull like a taunt, I needed to see it. I needed to understand what I had given to someone who claimed I didn't exist. The notebook I used for grocery lists became a ledger of sacrifice. 3 jobs for 7 years, the day shift at the hospital cafeteria, evenings cleaning offices downtown, weekends at the diner on Route 9. I calculated the hours, roughly 16 hours a day, 6 days a week for 84 months. That was over 35,000 hours. 35,000 hours during which I had missed Marcus's baseball games, his piano recitals, his middle school graduation because I was scrubbing someone else's toilet or serving hash browns to truckers at midnight. The private high school he'd insisted he needed to get into a good college, $48,000 over 4 years. The SAT prep courses, another $3,000. The college application fees, the visits to campus, the deposits. Then college itself. I had taken out loans I was still paying off, loans that would follow me into retirement. Medical school, still ongoing, still draining my accounts month by month. But it wasn't just the money. Money was just the language of sacrifice that accountants understood. What couldn't be calculated was the night I'd worked my shift at the diner with a fever of 102 because Marcus needed new textbooks. The time I'd sold my mother's engagement ring, the only thing of value I'd ever owned, to cover his security deposit on his first apartment. The years I'd eaten ramen and day-old bread so he could have fresh groceries. The times I'd walked 3 miles to work in the rain to save bus fare for his school supplies. I had given him everything, and in return, he erased me. The next morning, I called him. My hands were steadier than they'd been in Dr. Chen's waiting room, steadied by something that felt like anger, but ran colder, deeper. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice distracted. "Hey, Mom, kind of busy right now. What's up?" "I had an interesting experience yesterday," I said, keeping my voice level. "I overheard someone talking about you. about what a remarkable achievement it is that you got into medical school despite being an orphan. The silence that followed was so complete, I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then, "Mom, I can explain." "Can you?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended. "Please, Marcus, explain to me how I died. Was it sudden? Prolonged? Did I suffer?" "It's not like that." His voice had that defensive edge I remembered from his teenage years when I'd catch him in a lie and he'd twist himself into knots trying to justify it. "It's just easier sometimes. People have these assumptions about medical students, about who belongs here. When you say your mom worked in a cafeteria, they think..." "They what?" I cut him off. "They think less of you? They think you're not good enough?" "You don't understand the pressure here, Mom, the competition. Everyone's got these impressive families, these connections. Claire's dad is a surgeon. Her mom's on the hospital board. When we go to dinners with her family, when I meet her father's colleagues, it's just easier to let them make assumptions." Easier. The word sat between us like a stone. It was easier for him to let me vanish than to claim me. Easier to be an orphan than to be the son of a woman who had cleaned toilets to pay for his education. "I see," I said quietly. "And does Claire know the truth?" Another pause. Longer this time. "We don't really talk about it." That's when I understood. It wasn't just strangers and colleagues. It wasn't just professional networking and making good impressions. He had let the woman he claimed to love believe his mother was dead. He had accepted her sympathy, her family's kindness, all of it built on the foundation of my erasure. "Marcus," I said, and my voice was steadier than I thought possible, "I am not angry. I am not hurt. I am simply done." "Mom, don't be dramatic." "I am not being dramatic. I am being precise. For 32 years, I have organized my entire life around you. Every decision, every sacrifice, every single day has been about giving you opportunities I never had. And you've taken all of it, the money, the time, the devotion, and you've used it to build a life where I don't exist. So now I'm going to do something I should have done years ago. I'm going to start existing for myself." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm cutting you off. Financially, emotionally, completely. You're 29 years old, Marcus. You wanted to be an orphan? Congratulations. You are one now." I hung up before he could respond. The calls started within the hour. First Marcus, again and again, each voicemail progressively more panicked, then Claire. Apparently, she did know how to reach me when it mattered. Her voice on my voicemail was saccharine, dripping with false warmth. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Claire. Marcus is really upset. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Could you call me back so we can talk about this? I'm sure we can work this out." Work this out. As if my 3 decades of sacrifice was a billing dispute that could be resolved with a phone call. I didn't call back. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to see my sister, Diane, who lived 40 minutes away in a neighborhood I'd always considered too fancy for someone like me. We hadn't been close in years, not because of any falling out, but because I'd been too busy working, too busy managing Marcus's needs, too busy being a mother to be a sister. Diane opened the door and just looked at me for a long moment. Then she pulled me inside and poured me a glass of wine without asking if I wanted one. "I told people he's an orphan," I said, and saying it out loud to someone who knew, someone who remembered, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Diane didn't look surprised. She just nodded slowly, swirling her wine. "I wondered when you'd find out." "You knew?" "I saw it on his social media a year ago, one of those posts about overcoming adversity. He talked about growing up alone, about making it without family support. I wanted to tell you, but..." She trailed off, looking into her glass. "I didn't know how, and part of me hoped you'd never have to know." We sat there in her living room, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I talked. Not about Marcus's achievements, or his needs, or his latest crisis. I talked about me, about the exhaustion that had become so constant I'd stopped noticing it, about the resentment I'd pushed down for so many years it had fossilized into something hard and cold in my chest, about the moment in Dr. Chen's waiting room when my entire life had reorganized itself around a single, terrible truth. My son was ashamed of me. "You know what the worst part is?" I said, finishing my second glass of wine. "I was ashamed too. Not of him, never of him, but of myself. I was ashamed that I couldn't give him the kind of life other kids had, that I couldn't be a doctor or a lawyer or something impressive, that the best I could offer was clean clothes and a full stomach and love. And apparently, that wasn't enough, or it was too much, or it was the wrong kind of everything." Diane reached across and took my hand. Her grip was firm, grounding. "Joanna, listen to me. You gave him everything. The fact that he's too much of a coward to acknowledge it says nothing about you and everything about him." But that was the thing. I had given him everything. That was the problem. I had given so completely, so totally, that I'd forgotten to keep anything for myself. And now, at 61 years old, I had to figure out who I was when I wasn't Marcus's mother. The next few weeks were strange. Marcus kept calling, but his tone had shifted. The panic had given way to something more calculated. He'd talk about his upcoming tuition payment, about how stressed he was, about how he didn't know how he'd manage. He never quite asked for money directly, but the implication hung in every conversation, like bait on a hook. I didn't bite. For the first time in his life, I let him struggle without rushing in to save him. Then came the email that changed everything. It was from Claire's mother, Patricia Donovan. The subject line read, "Regarding Marcus. Mrs. Patterson, I hope this message finds you well. Claire has told me about the recent difficulties between you and Marcus, and I wanted to reach out mother to mother. I understand that Marcus may have been less than forthcoming about certain aspects of his background. As a mother myself, I can imagine how hurtful that must be. However, I hope you can understand the pressure these young people are under. The medical community can be quite judgmental, and sometimes our children make choices we wouldn't prefer in order to protect themselves professionally. That said, Marcus is at a critical point in his education. His tuition for next semester is due in 3 weeks, and I understand you've been his primary source of financial support. Whatever personal issues exist between you, I hope you won't let them derail his career at this crucial juncture. I've always believed that a mother's love transcends pride. I'm sure once you've had time to process your feelings, you'll want to continue supporting your son's dreams. Warmest regards, Patricia Donovan." I read it 3 times, each time feeling a different emotion. First, disbelief at the audacity, then anger at the manipulation. Finally, something close to pity for this woman who thought love could be measured in tuition payments and that motherhood meant swallowing your dignity forever. I crafted my response carefully, editing it a dozen times before I was satisfied. "Mrs. Donovan, thank you for your concern. You're correct that Marcus has been my primary source of financial support. His only source, in fact. I've worked 3 jobs, taken out loans I'm still repaying, and sacrificed every comfort to fund his education. I did this because I believed in him, because I loved him, because I thought that's what mothers do. What I've learned, however, is that love without respect is just exploitation. Marcus didn't just hide aspects of his background, he erased me entirely. He took everything I gave and used it to build a life where I don't exist. You write about a mother's love transcending pride, but I'm not talking about pride. I'm talking about basic human dignity. I'm talking about being acknowledged as a person, not just a funding source. Marcus is 29 years old. He has a medical degree that I paid for. If he can't figure out how to fund his final year, perhaps he's not as capable as you all seem to think. Or perhaps he needs to do what I did at his age, work for it. You say you're writing mother to mother. Well, mother to mother, let me tell you something. The greatest disservice we do our children is teaching them that love means accepting whatever treatment they dish out. I loved my son enough to give him everything. Now, I'm going to love myself enough to stop. Best regards, Joanna Patterson. I hit send before I could second guess myself. The liberation I felt was immediate and intoxicating. The response came within an hour. This time, the warmth was gone. Mrs. Patterson, I am disappointed by your selfishness. Marcus has worked incredibly hard to get where he is. To abandon him now over hurt feelings and miscommunication is simply cruel. Clell is devastated. She's been crying all evening, worried about Marcus's future and his emotional state. Whatever issues you have with your son, think of the innocent people you're affecting. I hope you can find it in your heart to reconsider. Patricia Donovan. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to someone who saw my 32 years of sacrifice as hurt feelings, and my son's erasure of me as miscommunication. But the email accomplished something Patricia Donovan hadn't intended. It crystallized my resolve. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been made to feel that their love was only valuable when it came with no expectations of respect. Every parent who'd been guilted into funding adult children's lives. Every giver who'd been made to feel selfish for finally saying no. I started documenting everything. The loans I'd taken in Marcus's name with my signature as co-signer, the credit cards I'd opened to pay for his expenses, the bank statements showing transfer after transfer. I organized it all in a folder with methodical precision, not because I planned to do anything with it, but because seeing it in black and white helped me understand the scope of what I'd done and what had been done to me. The total came to $187,000, not counting the hours of labor, the missed opportunities, the health problems from stress and overwork, just the raw financial cost of raising someone who claimed to have raised himself. Diane came over the evening I finished the calculations. She looked at the spreadsheets and ledgers spread across my kitchen table and let out a low whistle. Jesus, Joe, I knew it was a lot, but this is what love costs when it's not reciprocated, I said. We sat there in silence for a while. Then Diane said something that had been hovering at the edges of my consciousness, but that I hadn't been able to articulate. You know what this is really about? It's not just that he said he was an orphan. It's that he meant it. He wasn't lying to impress people. He genuinely doesn't see you as his mother, not in any real way. To him, you were just infrastructure, like the electricity or the plumbing, necessary for things to function, but not something you think about or acknowledge. She was right, and that truth was both devastating and somehow freeing. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went through old photo albums, the kind with actual printed pictures in plastic sleeves. There was Marcus at 5, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a drawing he'd made of the two of us. Marcus at 10, in his Little League uniform that I'd bought secondhand and mended 3 times. Marcus at 13, sullen and self-conscious, standing next to me at the science fair where his volcano project had won 2nd place. In every photo, I was there. Not just physically present, but there. My hand on his shoulder, my smile directed at him, my entire being oriented around him like a planet around the sun. I wondered when that had stopped being enough, or if it ever had been. The phone calls from Marcus changed in tone over the following weeks. The pleading gave way to anger. The anger gave way to bargaining. The bargaining gave way to something that almost resembled self-reflection, though I suspected it was just another manipulation tactic. "Mom," he said in one voicemail. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I've taken you for granted. You're right, I have, and I'm sorry. Can we please talk about this?" I almost called back. The pull of 32 years of conditioning was strong. But then I remembered that his apology had come 3 weeks after his tuition deadline. I wondered if he would have this epiphany if his payments had been covered. Instead of calling Marcus, I called the financial aid office at his medical school. I explained that I would no longer be contributing to my son's education and asked them to remove me as a co-signer on his loans. "I'm afraid that's not possible," the administrator told me. "The contracts are legally binding. You'll remain responsible for the debt regardless of your relationship with the borrower." So I would be paying for Marcus's education even after cutting him off. The loans would follow me for years, possibly decades. But at least there would be no new debt. No more transfers, no more last-minute emergencies that somehow always required exactly the amount in my checking account. The hardest part wasn't Marcus's anger or Claire's family's judgment. It wasn't even the financial burden I'd still be carrying. The hardest part was mourning who I thought my son was, or maybe mourning who I needed him to be so that all my sacrifice would mean something. 3 months after that conversation in Dr. Chen's waiting room, I ran into Marcus by accident. I was leaving the grocery store, my arms full of bags, when I saw him getting out of a car in the parking lot. A nice car, newer than mine had ever been. We stared at each other across the asphalt. He looked different, thinner, tired, but also harder somehow, like something in him had calcified. "Mom," he said finally. Just that, my title stripped of warmth or meaning. "Marcus, can we talk?" I looked at him, this stranger who had my eyes and his father's nose, and absolutely none of the softness I'd spent 30 decades nurturing. "We're talking now. I mean, really talk. Maybe get coffee or something." "Why?" The question seemed to confuse him. "Because you're my mother." "No," I said quietly. "According to you, your mother is dead. I'm just the woman who funded your education and raised you and gave you everything. We're not the same person, apparently." His face flushed. "That's not fair. You explained that it was easier to erase me than to be ashamed of me. Yes, I remember." I shifted the grocery bags in my arms. They were heavy, but not as heavy as this conversation. "I have to go, Marcus. When can we talk? Really talk?" I thought about it. Thought about all the conversations we might have, all the explanations and justifications, and maybe apologies. Thought about the work it would take to rebuild anything from these ruins. Thought about whether I even wanted to. "I don't know," I said finally. "Maybe never. Maybe when you can introduce me to Claire and her family without flinching. Maybe when you can say, my mother worked in a cafeteria to put me through school with pride instead of shame. Maybe when you understand that sacrifice and love are gifts, not obligations, and that I don't owe you anything anymore." I walked to my car and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see him standing there, diminished somehow, like a child who just realized the world wouldn't bend to his will. That night, I made myself dinner, a real dinner, not ramen or whatever was on sale. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. I'd bought it years ago thinking I'd drink it when Marcus graduated from medical school, but this seemed like a better reason to celebrate. The death of the person I'd been and the fragile, uncertain birth of whoever I might become next. Diane called while I was on my second glass. "How are you holding up?" "I saw him today, Marcus." And nothing. He wanted to talk. I said, maybe someday, maybe never. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. How did I feel? Not sad exactly. Not angry anymore either. Just quiet. Like standing in an empty house after years of noise. "Free," I said finally. "Terribly, wonderfully free." "Good. Now comes the hard part." "What's that?"
Figuring out who you are when you're not defined by him. She was right. For 32 years, I had been Marcus's mother first and Joanna Patterson's second or third or not at all. Now I had to excavate whoever I'd been before motherhood consumed everything, or maybe discover someone entirely new. I started small. I joined a book club at the library. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. I said yes when the woman who worked the register at the grocery store, Sharon, I learned her name was Sharon, invited me to her church's potluck dinner. People asked about my family sometimes. The question that used to fill me with pride now just made me tired. I have a son, I'd say. We're not close. And I changed the subject before the follow-up questions could come. Some people probably thought I was a bad mother. Maybe I was. Maybe good mothers were supposed to accept whatever treatment their children dished out, supposed to keep giving until there was nothing left of themselves to give. But I was done trying to be a good mother. I was trying to figure out how to be a whole person.
6 months after the parking lot conversation, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email, an actual letter, handwritten on nice stationery. It was from Marcus. Mom, I'm not going to pretend I understand why you cut me off. From my perspective, I made one mistake, one stupid, immature mistake, and you threw away our entire relationship. That seems disproportionate to me. It seems cruel. But Claire has been making me see a therapist. Yes, I'm paying for it myself. You'd be proud. And the therapist has been making me think about things I'd rather not think about. She asked me to make a list of everything you did for me growing up. Not just the big things, but everything. And Mom, the list was 47 pages long, single-spaced. I had to stop because I couldn't remember anymore, not because I'd run out of things to write. Then she asked me to make a list of everything I did for you. I got to half a page before I had to stop, not because I couldn't remember, because there wasn't anything else to write. I took everything you gave, and I didn't even acknowledge it. Worst, I was ashamed of it, ashamed of you. And I told myself it was because of external pressure, because of expectations, because of the culture of medical school, but that was a lie. The truth is, I was ashamed because loving you, claiming you, meant claiming my own history. And my history isn't impressive. It's just humble, poor, working class, all the things I spent my whole life trying to escape. I'm not writing this to ask for money or for you to come back. I don't deserve either. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to acknowledge what I did, even if it doesn't change anything. So, I see it now. I see what you gave. I see what I took. I see who I became in the process. I don't know if I can change. I don't know if I even know how to be the son you deserved, but I'm sorry, for whatever that's worth. Marcus. I read the letter 3 times. Each time I expected to feel something different. Forgiveness, maybe, or vindication, or at least some kind of softening, but I just felt tired. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because the truth was, his apology, sincere as it might be, didn't undo anything. It didn't give me back the years I'd lost. It didn't erase the humiliation of hearing my existence denied. It didn't change the fact that he'd only started seeing me as human when I stopped being useful. A week later, I got an email from Claire. It was brief, almost businesslike. Mrs. Patterson, Marcus showed me his letter to you. He also told me the truth about everything. About you, about his childhood, about the sacrifices you made. I'm ashamed that I believed his story about being an orphan. I should have questioned it. I should have been more curious about where he came from, who raised him. The fact that I wasn't says something uncomfortable about me and my assumptions. For what it's worth, I think what you did was incredibly brave. Not just working 3 jobs to raise him, but cutting him off when he disrespected you. My mother would never do that. She'd just keep giving and pretending she doesn't notice how little she gets back. I don't expect you to forgive Marcus. I don't even know if I would forgive him if I were you. But I wanted you to know that I see you now, and I'm sorry it took this long. Claire. This email, somehow, affected me more than Marcus's letter. Maybe because Claire had no obligation to write it. Maybe because there was no request hidden in it, no expectation of reconciliation or renewal. Just acknowledgement. Just seeing. I wrote back, just 2 lines. Thank you for writing. I appreciate your honesty.
That night, I dreamed about Marcus as a child. Not a specific memory, just the general sense of him, small and trusting, his hand in mine, believing I could fix anything. I woke up crying, mourning not just who he'd become, but who we both lost in the process of getting there. A year passed, then another. I built a life that didn't revolve around anyone else's needs. I volunteered at the library. I took a part-time job at a bookstore, not because I needed the money, but because I liked being around stories that weren't my own. I traveled, just small trips, nothing fancy, but places I'd always wanted to see and never had time for. Marcus sent birthday cards, Christmas cards, brief emails on Mother's Day. I responded sometimes briefly, maintaining a cordial distance. We were polite strangers who happened to share DNA. Then, 2 years after that conversation in the parking lot, my phone rang at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. It was Marcus. Mom. His voice was strange, thick, unsteady. I need to tell you something. My first instinct was panic. Was he hurt? Sick? In trouble? But I caught myself. I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the woman who dropped everything to rush to his rescue. What is it? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Claire and I are getting married. Congratulations. He paused. I could hear him breathing, gathering courage or composure or both. I wanted to ask if you'd come to the wedding. And Mom, I want to introduce you, really introduce you. I want everyone there to know who you are and what you did, and his voice cracked. I want them to know how badly I fucked this up, how badly I fucked us up. I sat down slowly on my couch. This was the moment I'd imagined 1,000 times. Marcus, repentant and real, asking me back into his life. In my fantasies, I'd either forgiven him immediately, relief and joy washing away 2 years of hurt, or I'd refused coldly, savoring my power to deny him what he wanted. But the reality was more complicated. I felt neither triumph nor tenderness, just a deep, bone-weary uncertainty. Why now? I asked. Why after 2 years? Because I'm getting married and I want my mother there. Because Claire's been asking me every week if I've called you yet. Because my therapist says I need to stop waiting for the perfect moment and just reach out. Because every time something good happens, I think about calling you and then I remember I don't have the right anymore, and it hurts. It hurts all the time, Mom. Good, I said quietly. What? Good that it hurts. Pain is how we learn. I spent 30 years in pain because of how you treated me, and I never learned to stop. Maybe you'll be smarter than I was. Does that mean you won't come? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Thought about walking into a wedding where I'd once been unwelcome, where people would know my history of being erased. Thought about watching my son marry a woman I barely knew in a ceremony that would probably be elegant and expensive and nothing like the humble celebration I'd once imagined. But I also thought about the alternative, staying away out of pride or hurt or principle, and spending the rest of my life wondering if I'd made the right choice. I'll come, I said finally. But Marcus, I'm not coming as your salvation. I'm not coming to make you feel forgiven or to prove everything's okay between us. I'm coming because weddings are important and because, despite everything, I want to witness this part of your life. But we're not fixed. We might never be fixed. Do you understand? Yes, his voice was small. I understand. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Diane would probably say I was making a mistake, that I was letting him back in too easily.
But this didn't feel easy. It felt like walking a tightrope between two different versions of myself. The mother I'd been and the person I was becoming. The wedding was in 3 months. I bought a dress. Nothing extravagant, but nice, dignified. I practiced what I'd say when people asked about my relationship with Marcus. Something simple and honest. We've had our difficulties, but I'm glad to be here.
The night before the ceremony, Marcus called again. Mom, I just wanted to say, tomorrow when I introduce you, I'm going to tell people the truth about everything. About the cafeteria and the 3 jobs and the loans. About how I told people you were dead. About what an asshole I was. Is that okay? Marcus, I said gently, tomorrow isn't about me. It's about you and Claire. Don't make it a confessional. Just introduce me as your mother. That's enough. Are you sure? I'm sure. The wedding was beautiful. Claire's family had spared no expense. Flowers everywhere, a string quartet, champagne that probably cost more per bottle than I used to make in a week. I felt out of place in my simple dress among the elegant guests, but I held my head high. When Marcus introduced me to Claire's father, he said, "Dad, this is my mother, Joanna Patterson. She raised me by herself and worked 3 jobs to put me through school. Everything I am, I owe to her." It was the simple truth. No drama, no groveling, just acknowledgement. Claire's father shook my hand warmly. "Mrs. Patterson, it's an honor. Marcus has told us a lot about you. You should be very proud." I looked at Marcus. He was watching me with something like hope in his eyes, waiting to see if his words had been enough. "I am proud," I said. And in that moment, I realized it was true. Not proud of the man who'd erased me, but proud of the man who'd found his way back to honesty. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. At the reception, I sat at a table with people I didn't know, making polite conversation. I watched Marcus and Claire dance, watched him laugh with his friends, watched him live the life I'd made possible, and I felt okay. Not joyful, not vindicated, just okay. Before I left, Marcus found me in the lobby. "Mom, wait." He handed me an envelope. "Don't open it now, just later." In my hotel room that night, I opened it. Inside was a check, not for the full amount I'd spent on him over the years, but significant. $15,000. And a note. "Mom, this is the first payment. I'm going to pay you back. All of it. Not because it'll erase what I did, but because you deserve to retire without debt, because I should have been doing this all along. I know money doesn't fix this, but it's a start. I love you. I'm sorry it took me so long to show it. Marcus." I stared at the check for a long time. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to prove I didn't need his money, that I'd cut him off because of principle, not poverty, but that would be a lie. I did need the money. The loans were crushing me. My retirement was a joke. And accepting his help didn't mean accepting his treatment. I deposited the check the next morning. Over the following years, Marcus sent a payment every month. Sometimes we talked on the phone, sometimes we didn't. We were rebuilding slowly a relationship that looked nothing like the one we'd had before. It was more honest, more balanced, less consuming. I never moved back into the role of self-sacrificing mother. I maintained my boundaries, I built my own life, and gradually, carefully, I let him back into parts of it. 3 years after the wedding, Marcus and Claire had a baby. When Marcus called to tell me, his voice was different again, softer, uncertain in a new way. "Mom, we had a daughter. Her name is Sophia." I felt something shift in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "Congratulations. How's Claire doing?" "She's good. Tired, but good." He paused, and I could hear him breathing, gathering courage. "Mom, I was up all night with Sophia, just holding her, watching her sleep, and I kept thinking about you, about what it must have been like for you when I was born, knowing you'd be doing it alone after Dad died." Marcus was 2 when his father passed. He'd never had memories of him, only my stories. "It was terrifying," I said honestly. I had never been so scared in my life. "How did you do it? How did you work 3 jobs and still be there?"
I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Not guilt this time, but genuine wonder. The wonder of a new parent confronting the impossible mathematics of love and time and sacrifice. I don't know if I was there, Marcus. Not the way I should have been. Not the way I wanted to be. You were there enough, he said quietly. More than enough. I just couldn't see it. They didn't ask me to be involved with Sophia at first, and I appreciated that. This wasn't a magical reset button where a grandchild would heal all wounds. But Marcus sent photos sometimes. Claire called once to ask advice about sleep schedules. Small gestures that said, "You're welcome here, but we won't pressure you." When Sophia was 6 months old, they invited me to visit. I drove to their house, a modest 2-bedroom apartment, nothing like the expensive lifestyle I'd once funded, and Claire met me at the door with the baby. Mrs. Patterson, then she corrected herself. "Joanna, would you like to hold her?" I took Sophia carefully, this small, warm weight that smelled like milk and baby soap. She looked up at me with dark eyes. My eyes, I realized with a start. My genetics carried forward into this new generation. Marcus came out of the kitchen, and when he saw me holding his daughter, his eyes filled with tears. "Don't," I said, but not unkindly. "Let's not make this about the past." "I was just thinking," he said, "about what you said once, about me being infrastructure, something necessary that nobody thinks about." "Marcus." "No, let me finish. I'm looking at Sophia and I'm terrifying myself thinking about all the ways I could fail her. All the ways I could take her for granted or make her feel invisible. Or," his voice broke, "and I understand now what you meant about love not being enough if there's no respect. I want her to grow up knowing that her worth isn't tied to what she can give me, that I see her, really see her." Claire put her hand on his shoulder. She said to me, "We talk about you a lot, about the mistakes Marcus made. We're trying to be conscious, to do better." I looked down at Sophia, who had fallen asleep in my arms, her tiny hand curled against my chest. This child would grow up in a different world than Marcus had. She'd have 2 parents, financial stability, a father who'd learned, however painfully, how to value the people who loved him. "Just love her," I said. "Everything else is noise." I started visiting once a month, then twice a month, not because Marcus asked, but because I wanted to. I'd watch Sophia while Claire ran errands. I'd hold her while Marcus studied for his board certification exams. He'd finally finished medical school, funded by loans he was paying off himself, slowly and painfully. One evening, while Sophia napped and Claire was at work, Marcus and I sat in their small living room drinking coffee. "The payments," he said suddenly. "I've paid back $73,000. I want you to know I'm keeping track. I know you are. It'll be at least 10 more years before I pay it all back. Maybe 15. "Marcus, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." His voice was firm. "Not because you asked for it, but because it's right. Because every month when I make that transfer, I remember what you did for me. I remember what I took for granted." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he said, "Can I ask you something? Do you think Sophia will grow up knowing how much we love her, or will she just assume it, the way I did with you?" It was such a vulnerable question, so full of genuine fear, that I had to think carefully before answering. "I think," I said slowly, "that love isn't something you feel once and then check off a list. It's something you demonstrate over and over in ways that respect the other person's humanity. You didn't grow up not knowing I loved you, Marcus. You grew up knowing I loved you so much I'd let myself disappear. That's the lesson you learned, that love means erasing yourself. Don't teach Sophia that." What should I teach her? Teach her that love is reciprocal, that relationships require effort from both sides, that gratitude is not optional. I paused. Teach her that her parents are people, not just parents, that we have value beyond what we can give. He nodded, absorbing this. "I'm going to mess up, aren't I? As a father." "Probably. Everyone does. The question is whether you'll acknowledge it or pretend it didn't happen." "I'll acknowledge it. I promise."
2 years later, on a cold November morning, Marcus called me at 6 a.m. "Mom, can you come over? It's not an emergency. I need you." I drove over in my pajamas, my heart racing despite his assurance that nothing was wrong. When I arrived, Marcus answered the door holding Sophia, now 2.5 years old, both of them still in their pajamas. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually. But I woke up this morning and I was making Sophia breakfast and I needed to say something, and I needed to say it now, in person." We sat at their kitchen table. Sophia immediately crawled into my lap, clutching her stuffed elephant. "I've been thinking about the orphan thing," Marcus said, "about how I erased you, and I realized something recently that I needed to tell you." "What's that?" "I didn't just tell people you were dead because I was ashamed. I mean, yes, that was part of it, but there was something else." He looked down at his hands. "I told people you were dead because it was easier than admitting you existed and I'd failed you. If you were dead, I didn't have to think about your disappointment, your hurt. I could pretend I was tragically alone instead of admitting I was deliberately alone because I'd pushed away the one person who'd never stopped loving me." Sophia squirmed in my lap, reaching for her juice cup. I handed it to her automatically, the gesture so natural now. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because yesterday, Sophia told her daycare teacher that Grammy works at a bookstore and used to work at a hospital and also used to clean buildings because she wanted to help people. She was so proud when she said it, Mom, so proud to tell people about you." His voice cracked. "And I realized that's how I should have felt. That's how I should have always felt." I looked at this man who'd caused me so much pain, who was trying so hard to be better, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Forgiveness. Not the dramatic, sweeping forgiveness of movies and novels, but the quiet, gradual forgiveness of someone who's decided that holding on to anger hurts more than letting it go. "You can't change the past, Marcus," I said, "but you're changing the future. That matters." "Is it enough?" I thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know. Maybe there is no enough. Maybe this is just what it is. A relationship that broke and healed wrong with scars we'll carry forever. But we're here. We're trying. That's something. Sophia chose that moment to plant a sticky kiss on my cheek. "Love Grammy," she announced with the confident simplicity of a toddler who'd never questioned whether love was welcome. "I love you too, sweetheart," I said. Marcus was now crying, not trying to hide it. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up completely, for leaving the door open even when I didn't deserve it. I didn't do it for you," I said honestly. "I did it for me. Because completely cutting you off would have meant admitting that 32 years of my life were wasted. And they weren't, Marcus. They weren't wasted because they taught me something important." "What's that?" "That love without boundaries destroys the person giving it. That sacrifice without acknowledgement becomes resentment. That being a mother doesn't mean being a martyr." I shifted Sophia on my lap. "And it's never too late to choose yourself." We sat there for a while longer, drinking coffee while Sophia played with her toys. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. We'd never have what we'd lost, that easy, unquestioning bond of mother and child. But we had something else now, something harder won and more honest. As I drove home that morning, the sun rising over familiar streets, I thought about the woman I'd been in Dr. Chen's waiting room 5 years ago. The woman who'd heard her son call himself an orphan and felt her entire world collapse. She was devastated, broken, lost. But she'd also been brave enough to say no, brave enough to choose herself when everyone around her demanded she keep sacrificing. Brave enough to walk away from a relationship that was killing her, even though it meant enduring judgment and guilt and the particular loneliness of being alive and still being called dead. I wasn't that woman anymore. I was someone new, Someone who'd learned that you could love someone and still maintain boundaries, that you could forgive without forgetting, that you could be someone's mother without making them your entire world. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Thank you for coming over, for everything. I'm grateful every day that you're here. I pulled over to read it properly. For so long, those words were all I'd wanted to hear. But now reading them, I realized something. I didn't need them anymore. Not the way I once had. They were nice, but they didn't define my worth. I texted back, I'm grateful too. See you next week. And then I put the phone away and drove home to my small apartment with its bookshelf and its watercolor paintings and its quiet, hard-won peace. The life I'd built not around someone else's needs, but around my own. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when Marcus was born, when I'd held that small, perfect baby and promised him everything. But it was a good life, an honest life. It was mine. And in the end, after everything, that was enough.
Life's funny, isn't it, baby? You never really know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you got. Now you tell Auntie, what would you have done in this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing from my family. And if this story touched your heart, go on and like, share, and subscribe so Auntie can keep telling it like it is.